Well, because extroverted intuition follows the first law of time, which is all that has happened before will happen again.
This is so typical. This is so typical. Sorry, okay, I'm a bit hyper today. Hey there, welcome back to Type Evolution. I'm Olympia, and this video is about C.S. Joseph. Our topics can be quite similar, and there's significant overlaps. I'm gonna get more into that later, I think. So I already had a certain type in mind, and then when I found out he's actually typing himself as ENTP, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I have to step in here. I have to check if that's actually legit, what he's saying about ENTP, because not too long ago I actually published a new article on the most common MBTI mistypes online, and ENTP is one of those mistypes that are quite common, especially for guys, obviously. So who am I? I am a personality specialist, you could say. I have been studying various personality systems for around 7 years. It started around 2013, 2014. So I have been running 2 blogs where I have been sharing my thoughts on MBTI, Socionics, and Enneagram, and Big 5 as well. Also, I have been coaching and typing people for a couple of years as well. You can check that on my blog, typeevolution.com, under services. What you have to know about me and my typings is that I have not completed all the archetype descriptions yet. I'm really trying to get to the bottom of it and really being as accurate as possible, which can be difficult, especially because I have to find an archetype that is also relevant and applicable to real life, and that can people actually implement and use in order to feel more fulfilled. This is my issue with some of the very flowery archetype descriptions or archetype titles that don't really give much in terms of, personal development. It's mostly just a fancy term to make yourself sound cool. And if that's the only thing you're looking for, then I suppose my channel is also not right for you. Of course, with all of these things, everyone has their own perspective, so I can just share mine and hopefully it's gonna dispel some myths. But yeah, I'm gonna check it out, so jump on in with me. Now, ENTP, the Rogue. That term alone, I don't see how it's ENTP related. The only thing that's maybe related to it is that maybe some ENTPs don't fit into society, or including that picture, it just makes me think of like an edgy ST guy. Sorry, but especially of a certain Enneagram type. But I'm giving too much away. I should just go into the video, right? So let's finally get into the video.
Hey guys, it's Chase with csjoseph.life. Today we are enjoying a very nice rainstorm here in Northern California. And today we're going to be talking about another one of the personality profiles for our 16 personalities series.
Okay, let me just say my first impression. I am not a big proponent of visually typing people just based on their appearance, so I'm not really going too much into that. But I do include how people express themselves and their energy and things like that. He strikes me as an introvert right off the bat. So right off the bat, I have to say introvert. Just based on his energy level, his lack of expressiveness, buoyancy, emotionality. So especially when I'm looking at like an EP type, especially like an ENTP who is striving to be more outwardly emotional, like externally expressive because of the tertiary extrovert feeling.
That's not a question.
And who's an extrovert and tends to, have higher energy, be quite like that kind of thing. This is totally lacking here with him. Maybe this is just that video, but I don't think it's just that video. He strikes me rather as an introvert, especially an IT introvert.
I think he's the tip of the pyramid.
You can check. I've got videos about the communication styles that already point towards how extroverts and introverts differ in expression. So he would basically fit into my IT video. Is he more like Adam Driver, or is he more like Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know? It might seem superficial, but really introversion and extroversion can be visible in that way. Of course, there can be certain exceptions, but especially when it comes to ENTP, even if they are leaning towards ambiversion, like leaning towards introversion to some extent, because of the FE, they still want to come across as quite outwardly emotional, and they can do it to some extent way better than a typical introvert. Once again, it depends, but in his case, it's just clear to me. Am I the only one who's seeing that? So okay, let's just go further.
This particular type is near and dear to my heart because, well, it's my type. It's actually mine.
Note the lack of expressiveness. Just really note it. He's saying this is dear to my heart with a deadpan face. I have to say this is very typical of very introverted IT guys who are having an FI role moment. I talk more about the FI stress function in another video. Our stress function is actually not our inferior, but like the introvert or extroverted version of the inferior. So in the case of INTP and ISTP, the stress function is introverted feeling. And he just had like an introverted feeling moment being like, this is dear to my heart. But it was totally lacking any extroverted feeling. First of all, ENTPs whose weakest function is usually actually introverted feeling, they rarely make statements like that. And if they make statements like that, they are accompanied by extroverted feeling. Because the extroverted feeling is valued above introverted feeling and stronger than the introverted feeling. So they're going to be like way more expressive about it. Yeah, have a louder voice, have a smile on their face, something, just something. And in the case of someone who's quite introverted and an IT type, the extroverted feeling is going to be the weakest. So this is very easy to spot. They're just gonna be deadpan face mostly.
We're going to be looking at the ENTP, also known as the Extroverted Intuitive Thinking Perceiver.
If you just type yourself based on, yeah, I like to be intuitive, or I like to be open-minded, and I'm smart, and I like to think, and I'm messy, or I don't like to plan, then you're probably mistyping yourself. These are very superficial aspects, and they don't really address the functions, the cognitive functions. But I hope he's probably going to go into the cognitive functions. It would be weird if he didn't.
Also known as the visionary. Some people call it the originator, which is actually pretty true because the ENTP is very original in a lot of things and is constantly focused on innovation. Some people call the ENTP the innovator.
Innovator, that's not too bad. That's not too off. I call ENTP the experimentalist because extrovert intuition has an experimental attitude, especially to the world of ideas and concepts, and the TI is the mentalist, right? The cerebral aspect. And also ENTPs happen to often be really good or interested in conducting science experiments or being involved in the sciences. So this is how I basically narrowed it down. But once again, you can find the more accurate description of ENTP the experimentalist on my blog, typevolution.com.
I mean, I'm always innovating or coming up with new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking.
Pause. Okay, maybe I'm being too nitpicky, but new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking things. New ways of doing something can just be sensing related, can just be extrovert sensing related. New ways of thinking things can just be thinking related, TI. It's not necessarily extrovert intuition, really. Extrovert sensing can also be about newness, new things, new objects, new ways of modifying your body language, for example, or things like that. Sensing is not as one-dimensional as you think. It can be actually quite complex in its own way and quite cool in its own way.
It requires a lot of free thinking. I mean, the ultimate nightmare of the ENTP is going into a coma and then waking up, realizing it's 20 years later and society has changed so much that everyone's thoughts are monitored by police, for example, and there's no such thing as free thinking anymore.
Wow. Okay. Free thinking, this is just a TI value, I would say, probably. Free thinking being removed from extrovert thinking, not valuing that. So extrovert thinking is mostly the thinking that stems from an external viewpoint, removed from the subject. It's objective in that manner. It's mostly about the logic you can find outside of yourself, the data, the facts, the information, the measurements, the parameters. These are things you find in the external world, and they are removed from you personally. This is how it differentiates from introvert thinking, which is always still connected to a person's subjective viewpoint. So introvert thinking, what he called free thinking, you know, it's the subjective viewpoint. What you personally think is the logical construct of reality. So this is where all TP types, and to a lesser extent FJ types, have a relation to this kind of preferred thinking. But wow, like this whole story about waking up in a coma and being scared that the world is going to be a certain way that is really unlikely. This is actually, okay, I don't really want to mix Enneagram too much into this, but this is like a classic type 6 example, like classic phobic 6. Imagining the worst case scenario. You know, the weird thing is, very strong and very weak intuition can almost mirror itself. It's almost, you know, because the two sides of the same coin. So what I see here, you could say it's either a sign of very strong extrovert intuition or very weak extrovert intuition, because, or like just weak intuition in general, because, you know, that kind of fear or something that is so unlikely, like introvert intuition or intuition as a whole, the way they compensate for weak sensing is that they can have an intuitive, how you say, perception, or yeah, feeling is the wrong word, but they have this intuitive sense or intuition about how things develop. What he just described there, it's like this really out there, really unlikely outcome, and him being scared about something like that, it's just, it's really odd. And I don't think this is characteristic of ENTP at all, actually. ENTPs are 7s in the Enneagram. So ENTPs, they are rather focused on a positive outlook, a positive facade almost. You know, just think of someone like the Joker.
And there's no such thing as free thinking anymore, to the point where any ENTP, or even in some cases ESTPs, are just shot on sight because they have rebellious thoughts, for example, right? It's because of our TE critic. It just has to challenge all of the boundaries and all the rules.
Okay. I heard some people say that he has a weird system that is inaccurate. I actually tend to be quite, you know, open-minded to systems that don't seem to have factual backup or something like that, because I also don't value extrovert thinking. But this is just almost the exact opposite to what I just said, and what kind of defies the theory in a way, because he calls it the extrovert thinking critic. It's actually related to introvert thinking, you know, what he just described. But yeah, if you say it's the TE critic, yeah, it's critical of TE, I suppose. It's just not valuing it. So every type that doesn't value extrovert thinking is going to have, like, I guess, a TE critic. But yeah, anyway, let's just move on.
For everyone to see. Hopefully we can actually see it.
Oh my god, let me see. Oh yeah, oh my gosh. I have had people like asking me about this, asking me about these I don't know, functions. Hero, any, yeah, hero is for the first function, okay, it's not too bad. Parent for the second function, I find that pretty misleading. When I think of parent, I think rather of a function that is basically a superego function, like a function you don't really want to do, but your parent is like telling you to do it, you know, that kind of parent, like, okay, you should do this, do it. So it's rather a function you don't like to use. That's what I would think. Child, FE. You know what's funny? I was actually, before I was making this video, I was thinking, if I had to give certain functions certain ages, I would give the inferior function or the weakest function, the baby age, infant, you know, baby, child. So it's really interesting that he's saying FE is the child of, you know, like the child function, which I think makes way more sense for the inferior or like a really weak function, because it's basically a function that has not much wisdom and it doesn't have much ability and capability. It's quite, you know, restricted to a certain movement, so to speak. I would say the tertiary function, so to speak, or the mobilizing socionics is more like a teenager. Like the stronger it is in the person, the more it's like a rebellious teenager being like, oh, I know how to do it. Don't, like, stop telling me what to do. I know how to do it. I'm good at this. But in reality, they're actually not that great at it. SI inferior aspirational. Okay, I do agree that our weak but valued functions, so like, yeah, so in the case of ENTP would be SI and FE, that they are aspirational. But yeah, I'm kind of doubting that this is the case for him specifically. As I said, I'm already not convinced that he's an extrovert, so.
So it's an intellectual, so I'm always future thinking. For example, it's a starter type, visionary.
Future thinking, this is like another sign for introverted intuition valuing. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. So his entire thing about archetypes, purpose, and all that stuff that we both connect on, this is introverted intuition valuing and this introverted intuition stuff. He clearly values that, so I'm a bit surprised. It doesn't really make sense that he thinks he values extroverted intuition, but yeah, I suppose he thinks future thinking is related to extroverted intuition, which is not really the case necessarily. Extroverted intuition prefers just ideas for their own sake, or innovation for its own sake, and it is kind of removed from time. There can be a time component to it, but extroverted intuition is actually more static in that way. Certain ideas can exist outside of time. Whereas introverted intuition, the focus is also on in the future, because it's also about certain symbolism, certain archetypes within certain times, based on certain eras, epochs, certain trends, patterns. It requires more of a timely development and a future orientation that is just lacking in extroverted intuition.
Focus all about progress. I really don't care about things being under control. I can definitely operate in total chaos and still meet objectives and goals.
Okay, like operating total chaos, that is actually the funny thing is, so in my questionnaire asked people, can you readily mobilize in a crisis situation? Okay, I'm giving it away, but it actually measures extrovert sensing, so it's funny that he says that. In an environment, in an external environment that is unstructured and chaotic, being able to still function well. Yes, it is related to extroverted perception being one of the stronger functions. But in the way he's saying it, it just sounds more like extrovert sensing, you know, like the external environment actually being chaotic physically, not in terms of ideas or concepts, how it's made of, how it's physically, how, you know, like just imagine like a tornado or something like that, you know? So, okay, let's just continue.
As long as I have progress, as long as I'm moving and I can measure that progress, or at least see that there is progress happening, as an ENTP, doesn't bother me. Bring on the chaos. In fact, I'll even go out of my way to inject chaos in situations that I believe are stagnant in order to get progress going, in order to get movement going.
How is that not extrovert sensing? He like ENTPs, they don't like extrovert sensing and they prefer introvert sensing. So they actually prefer rather recreational activities that boost their internal vitality and that make them feel actually more at ease, more relaxed. And it's not about just getting things moving, you know, like being bored, nothing is moving along quickly enough. Like this is more of an extrovert sensing thing. And as I said, progress. So extrovert sensing and introvert intuition combined, they really like having a goal to strive towards, and then getting into action, into movement, and seeing tangible results of attaining that goal in the future, or that vision. So this is actually more characteristic of introverted intuition and extrovert sensing kind of together. but it's not really extrovert intuition.
We're willing to do the things that people don't really want to do in order to reach goals. And it could be our personal goals, or it could be the goals of the organization we work for, goals of the family, goals of the community, goals of the church, the parish.
It's like music to my ears, but not in the way how it should be, you know. If he was an ENTP, he wouldn't emphasize that at all. Like, maybe like in a small talk scenario where he thinks, okay, like in the role function, like the role function of ENTP is extrovert sensing, so they think they have to be like that for a momentarily amount of time, but it's not really something that they are passionate about or that drives them or they strive towards. And he's just pointing out all these goals, and because I value extrovert sensing, I kind of, you know, I like in quotation marks, you know, like I can relate to it in a way, but it's not ENTP.
Wow, this rainstorm is pretty crazy. So.
Oh man, okay. Like his lack of expressiveness is starting to amuse me. Because it was just like, this rainstorm is crazy with that face. This rainstorm is crazy. Oh man, this is so typical of like an IT type with strong introvert, like strong introvert thinking, you know, like strong in, like, yeah. Oh man. Okay.
Such is the way of the ENTP. So we have the ENTP.
By the way, also, I mean, I'm not that good at this kind of stuff, but I think his physicality and his bearing is also quite measured. I don't know how to explain it differently, but yeah, this is just way more typical of someone who's an S-type, especially like an IST type.
ENTP Ego. So Extroverted Intuition Hero, NE Hero, is my hero function. So what is that like? That's basically the ENTP's ability to tap into the metaphysical realm. We're aware of metaphysics, we're not really aware of physics so much, which means one of our weaknesses is that we really can't take a hammer to a nail. And
sorry, I had to interrupt. Metaphysics, that actually can go more to the introverted intuition realm. Not really necessarily extrovert intuition, but just continue.
I mean, don't expect me to build a freaking house. I'm just not going to do it. See, I'm going to hire someone else to do it. Oh, but that makes you less of a man because you can't take a hammer to a nail. No, I mean, if I'm making money in other ways and paying someone else to do it, that's known as an economy. Why should I be expected to do everything myself, huh? At least I could change my own oil, which most man children out there can't even remotely do that.
Oh my god. Man children. ENTPs are like one of the most childlike, at least in terms of external behavior, you know? It's like the mix of extrovert intuition and extrovert feeling. It makes you come across as childlike, as like exuberant, you know, and he's totally lacking that. And yeah, so if I go along with the ISTP typing, not all sensing types or ISTPs are gonna be into building houses, you know. This is just such a stereotype. I mean, yeah, it can, but not necessarily, you know. Like extroverted sensing, it's not just about like building a house or something like that. As I said, it can just be also like energetics. It can be like attaining a goal, being focused on that, being pushy, things like that. It's not just literally building a house. But he can change oil. That does fit the stereotype, right?
You know, of course, that came from the fact that my INFJ uncle basically looked at me one day and said, "Hey, if you have a penis in this family, you are expected to change your own oil. Get your ass in the shop." And that's how I learned.
That uncle doesn't sound INFJ at all. I cannot imagine any INFJ saying this ever. Like, how? This actually sounds more like a sensing type, like a type that has strong extrovert sensing, you know, like, do it, you know, like this kind of energy.
Extroverted Intuition Hero. It gives me basically the ability to have prescience or precognition. I can anticipate things before they happen.
That's introverted intuition. As I described earlier, the timely development of things.
Because extroverted intuition follows the first law of time, which is... all that has happened before will happen again.
Oh, this is so typical. This is so typical. Sorry, okay, I'm a bit hyper today. This is such typical LSI ISTP thing. Sorry, but so once again, this is actually introverted intuition. And this is Introverted Intuition, I would say, in the tertiary spot. And it's probably boosted as well. I think he's probably TI subtype. Like, he's very TI. And in that case, also, his use of extrovert sensing is not going to be as strong. And he's going to have introverted intuition, TI, NI, introvert thinking loops. And yeah, that can create this, I think he has been in this loop for a long time, and it kind of brings you out of touch with your secondary function. And I do say people should accept their type, but that also includes actually using your second function enough and not trying to be a different type. Anyways, believing that everything that happened before will happen again, this is kind of related to introverted intuition. It's like one side of it that looks into the past. According to Gulenko, this is the negative introverted intuition. That's more about not committing past mistakes again. And I have to say, from my perspective, and also knowing just, you know, stronger introverted intuition, it's not always exactly like it happened in the past. There are variations, and these variations occur based on the new developments that have happened in the time that time went on. So it's a simplistic way. It's not too bad, but it does work many times, but there are also significant times when it doesn't work. So this is kind of where what I said earlier, like, I think his introverted intuition is like the teenager that is like, oh, I know it, I'm so good at this, I can do it. And yeah, but then when it comes to actually the test of it, test and time, it actually fails. But it depends, of course. But it's just this kind of teenagery view on it that is overestimating oneself in this regard. Often, yes, things repeat themselves and can be cyclical, but you have to also take into account other developments, new developments. And the world is in flux, so the world is, you know, changing. It's not always the same. So there's going to be new developments, new things influencing certain outcomes and things like that. Anyway, I'm having here a moment. I think it's like he just totally warped it on its head. It's like he totally mixed up extroversion and introversion. The way he sees NE is like NI and vice versa. It's really a bit confusing.